Hi class, welcome to Module 3. As you can see, as we move along with exploring medical sociology or the sociology of medicine, we're coming to some key points in Chapter 3, which really focus on sociology and so much of what we are looking at throughout the course. And so it's really going to be looking at why health is so much an issue for sociology and why it comes into place and is tied to the other social issues and social problems that we face in the United States today. So this particular chapter looks at causes and the types of illnesses that they're not randomly distributed, that it makes a difference what race we are part of, what gender we're part of, what social economic standing we have. So primary things to see how it affects the relationship. Now this is going to bring in physical reality of differences biologically, but we're going to see how strong the social influence is in exploring. So let's look at the PowerPoints briefly. So what are the big issues here as far as distribution of illness? We obviously see a spring break party on the cover slide for the chapters, PowerPoints, and it makes a difference, doesn't it? And as we think about that, age is such a significant difference, as well as gender and how people follow through. So social factors that affect illness include social class, and we can already jump in and see that social class makes a difference. Now we have a national health care system. We have the Affordable Care Act, ACA, right? Or Obamacare, still being argued. So everyone has health care. Well, no, everyone does not have the same health care. This is still a privatized system, and it makes a difference on what we can afford, what goes into place. And social class helps within that process, as well as the way we live and the jobs we do are pretty powerful when we look at that. And then there's the difference of race and ethnicity. And yes, we have biological pieces coming into place with definitely disease lines that run along certain ethnic and racial areas, but it's the exposure to other social forces, factors that come into place. If we live in unsafe housing, if we're unable to support in the same way, if we're unable to afford things, and then age makes a difference. We have an aging society, and therefore people who are older have more illness because they have chronic illness, but age affects at younger ages as well on the lifestyle we live. Go back to our first picture and you can see that. And then sex and gender make a difference, don't they? Very significant differences. So, quick look at theory. Theory basically says, as functional theory, that the greatest access to resource are the most powerful, and that the person's place in society defines where they are. And we can see that. We can see how social class affects our health. The illness causes poverty. In other words, those that have poorer health are more likely to be poor. As we look at those with disabilities, we see that they don't achieve at high level, and yet we have other issues, that high costs that can break a family when there is illness in place. And yet this only explains a small difference here among the poor. That poverty itself, when we start exploring it, the inequality results from the social system. In other words, what happens? How does poverty cause illness? Well, greater stress, less control over stress. We live in a more dangerous neighborhood. Things happen. It becomes very powerful in affecting whether you even leave your home to exercise on a regular basis if you're unsafe in the neighborhood you're walking in. Can you afford those stress relieving activities that may be in place. And then there are such things as environmental pollution, a significant factor as we look at this chapter, and we find that those that are the poorest are more likely to live near a toxic waste facility, are more likely to have a dump in their backyard. And we can see that even the disposal of nuclear waste is on the poorest Indian reservations, where they pay them and endanger their health. Unsafe housing is a significant issue, whether the windows are closing, whether the lead paint is on the windowsill, whether there's problems within roach infested environments, or mice coming into the home, or poor sanitation issues that will affect someone's health. And there's a lack of food and poor nutrition. And we look at how many people are faced with nutrition issues related to poverty. Some pretty strong points as you explore some of the videos you're going to be seeing in this chapter. Race makes a significant difference here. And let's talk about why race makes a difference. It's not because we're biologically that different, that it's that social construct with almost no basis for a biological definition of race, but it's all related to that social status that is put into place that measures someone and says this is one race and this is another and where they belong. And the fact that a high school educated African American male is less likely to have a job than a white male who's dropped out of high school. And so what comes into place here? Location where they're living, types of jobs, all of these fill into the fact, but then there is that prejudice that comes into place, and that it affects health. Then there's also belief systems that are different. And so we look at Jamaican families in Chicago, and we look at their health care, and they don't believe in the typical Western medicine, and they tend to go to their healers, and therefore they don't get the same type of prenatal care, and therefore have some highest of the infant mortality rates in the country. You know, it's very significant when we look back to those demographics that we looked at earlier, the epidemiology, that we make it very clear that the United States sits very poorly among the world leading nations related to infant mortality and the health, because of the ethnic diversity and the differences that exist related to health care. And so we need to look at these ethnic diverse groups. And so the Hispanic. Now think about the term Hispanic and how it comes into place. They're totally multiple different groups that were thrown together in one group. It really doesn't make a lot of sense to categorize anyone with a Spanish background in the same place as Hispanic, does it? Because there's a difference between a Puerto Rican who is a Native American United States citizen versus a Mexican or Central American, or even those in South America that may have different levels of health. But Hispanics appear to live longer than whites, and this may reflect poor data. However, there is a significant difference too, isn't there, within this population and who qualifies as part of it. So in looking at this data from the sociological perspective, why do Hispanics? Well, there's a structural support within the family that may be there, and there may be an access to more support than other ethnic diverse groups, right? As we start to explore it. Native Americans are the highest risk for health problems. They have the highest level of infant mortality. They have more alcohol-related deaths and diabetes. And if any of you were in the last 2 semesters as an entering freshman and you looked at the text that was there for your freshman reading, you start understanding the power of that social influence of having alcohol and the stress of knowing what you don't necessarily have a life or a job, or not being able to better yourself in certain situations. And so we see this high level of infant mortality, and we have significant issues that affect this particular ethnic diversity. And then the Asian American. Now think about this, overall better health than other Americans, also higher incomes, and it's significantly different. And if you've taken social problems, you've looked at this particular issue and know that Asian Americans do not get the same support within Fair Employment Acts because they are considered at a higher level. Oftentimes second generation Chinese or second generation Japanese with higher income, higher education levels. And so what we see is that the newest immigrants face more health problems than the typical Asian American. And so you have to divide it out to understand this ethnic difference that comes into place, and where it gets into place of looking at who gets health care and who's supported in the process and what their beliefs are. So there are significant issues to look at within ethnicity and culture, right? As we start to explore these examples used within the text. So, environmental racism is talked about within this process, and it refers to that disproportionate burden that the environmental pollution goes directly onto those of ethnic minorities and how it affects the difference. Now think too to what we just talked about as far as housing. And then we can look at ethnic minorities and see that even food access to the poorest, inner city food access may be very difficult, higher costs, less safe neighborhoods. And so getting this nutrition they need in place. Also think of this in relationship to the rural areas that we're sitting in. And we see this disadvantage of not being able to access reliable food sources or food sources that they can afford their food from. It comes into play as we start looking at these sociological issues. Age is a significant factor. Mortality rates drop after infancy, but they rise after 40. And after the age of 65, chronic illness is prevalent. And we can spend a lot of time looking at the aging population, but those over 85 is the fastest growing population in the United States because people are living longer. And those 85 plus, about 50% face memory problems and severe chronic illness. We have a high percentage, about 10% report more than one problem with ADLs and IADLs. Important terms for you to know as you explore mobility and issues of aging. Well, what's sex got to do with it? There's your next. What does it make a difference? Men are more likely to die at younger ages than women. In fact, men and women outnumber men up until about the mid-30s when women start outnumbering men and continue to outnumber men for the rest of our lives. It's a significant piece. It's a biological category, but think too here, it is a social construct that we look at the differences between masculine and feminine and who has access. Men earn more money, right? Women earn about 77 cents on the dollar to men. And so that we know that they earn less money. They also have different biological issues, and so we see both that gender and the social categories, that social construct, and our physical biological self make a difference and have effects. So women get sicker, but men tend to die sooner. Men don't seek out help in the same way. They don't go to doctors as often as women do. There are some pretty strong social reasons that come into place. We also know that when men have heart attacks, they'll tend to die more often than women, and there is a difference in the process biologically. And then we're noticing the difference within stress, which seems to be disappearing, as well as the exposure to hazardous things. Go back to our first slide, and we see pictures of men, and the beer challenge there. But women too face many social influences, and the rate of cigarette smoking in women has almost equaled that of men. We can see these characteristics coming in place. And so for the United States, we have a lot of issues here, don't we? We have the difference of pay levels from men to women. We have the fact that women live longer and we're more likely to have those chronic diseases. We have the feminism of aging, that women are considered old at a much younger age than men, and men, we look at that social condition and they are considered distinguished by the way that's changing. You can see the isms coming forth, can't you? Racism, sexism, ageism, and the power of those social conditions to affect issues. Now, the slides finish up with the discussion of domestic partner violence in these, but there are significant other pieces in this chapter that go forward. And we already know that both men and women face domestic partner violence, but women are more likely to be killed and hurt at a higher level than men. So what are you going to do with this chapter? You're going to read your textbook. You're going to explore a film here. You're going to view the Redefining Healthcare. Now, this film is out of date in the fact that it doesn't consider the new Affordable Care Act in it, but it does show the difference between that social condition going back and forth, and it is nicely done and is an MSNBC special that was done, so it's easier viewing than perhaps the more studious type of video that you may be seeing. This chapter also addresses the disorder of that occur within sexual development. And I wanted to include this because this is a new movie out made in the UK, which brings more statistics related to intersex children and intersex society that are covered in brief in this chapter. And I think you'll find some interesting pieces here. And so when we look at this sociology of intersex, I myself knew very little about that, even studying medical sociology for my PhD, until I really started to delve into this area. For those of you who have taken sex and gender, you will notice that you've already seen this film. So just a quick look through it if you've done that. But otherwise, this is a very interesting film that has come out with some new statistics related to intersex and how that defines health as well and how we face it. The assessment for this module is again your option to take this week. Remember, you need to take at least 10 throughout the course. Again, a multiple choice quiz for this situation, and your chapter summary follows. I'm hoping these videos aren't boring you, but please give me some feedback on this. These are new to this particular course for sure, as we're moving forward and looking at the situations that you're approaching. As I said before, I'm recording at least 3 videos so that to start the course, And so these may seem a little off tilt to where you currently are in the course, but that allows you then to work ahead as we start moving through these. Make sure you're keeping up with your assignments. And as you know, you have that early interview due very soon. Again, if you have questions, sorry about that. If you have questions, please post them. Make sure that you interact with me or email me, and please keep up with your discussion boards. So far, at this point, we have no questions. That's because I'm just going to be opening this course as soon as this renders into YouTube. Have a great day.